I've lived in a couple of different rectories since I got ordained a priest, and in two of those places I saw, it's not a picture, but it's an art piece of the Last Supper with a quote along the bottom. And at first you don't recognize it, then you say, let's take a look at this quote. And I was thinking, this is my body, this is my blood, or do this in memory of me. No. The quote along the bottom is, Amen, I tell you, one of you will betray me. Why this image is present in the rectory dining room, I don't know. However, today it takes on a certain significance, and we used to call this Spy Wednesday, because now Judas Iscariot is spying for the time, the opportunity he has to turn over Jesus to the authorities. People can debate his reasons and all that behind it. What's most important at this point is Jesus' understanding of his mission and his ability to really hand himself over. Last Sunday, the second reading was a beautiful, the second reading from St. Paul talked about how he emptied himself, gave himself over to die on a cross, and how that was such a beautiful offering to allow himself to be handed over. And it confronts our culture a lot, because we want to be in control, we want to determine our fate, we want to chart our course. But Jesus' example is to allow ourselves to be handed over to lesser hands, to be handed over to lesser wisdom, to allow ourselves to be handed over to hands just as fragile as our own. Not because we disdain the life that we have, but because there is a greater trust in the hands that continue to support us through whatever difficulty. Jesus handed himself over to lesser authorities because he had trust in that his Father's hands were still carrying him through, and that it was Father's hands were carrying him up through the cross. It was his Father's hands that would ultimately lift him up from the tomb. Jesus could offer this because he understood that there were much stronger hands that were supporting him. And I was reading some poetry from Dietrich Bonhoeffer the other night. And Dietrich Bonhoeffer was a Lutheran pastor who was imprisoned by the Nazis because he opposed the Nazi regime. In prison, leading up to the days of his own execution, he talked about the stages of freedom. This one part where he lists the stage of suffering really caught my attention. This is the stage of freedom he calls wondrous transformation. Your strong, active hands have been bound. Powerless and lonely, you perceive the end of your deeds. And yet you breathe a sigh of relief, and you place what is right into a stronger hand, calmly and patiently, and you are content. Only for one moment you blissfully touched freedom, then you handed it over to God so that he may gloriously complete it. That's the freedom of the cross. That's the freedom that Jesus understood, that he could hand over his deeds to his Father because he knew that God would bring it to completion. And that completion would bring freedom to all who could also hand over their deeds, their life, into the hands of the Father. And sometimes in our life we come into contact with this, our powerful hand, that we are now powerless and lonely. And we could fall into despair, or we could follow the path of the Divine Master and take all of our deeds, all the things that we have done and we have been in life, and put them into a stronger hand, trusting that he will bring them to completion.